What you're seeing right now is footage I shot at this really pretty street we got in downtown Lexington. I actually used quite a bit of this stuff in my Pixel 4a first impressions, but what you probably didn't know is I was planning to shoot some self-portraits down here and make a video on the process if the trees hadn't been dying by that point, because schoolwork pushed back the day I actually had time to get out there, and you can see in the footage everything's already half dead. Here's a look from a super talented photographer from around here though, just to give you an idea of what the street would have looked like in its prime. So that was strike one of this whole fall photo shoot idea, and for whatever reason, a week or so later I was suffering from amnesia and not even thinking about the leaves being dead, and planning to head to a park by my house and try my luck there. But this attempt was worse, as my car wouldn't even start because of ongoing problems with it. I ended up walking there and still didn't get any good photos. This photo from the also incredibly talented Volandis was what I was kind of visualizing in this scenario, but just imagine all the trees in the background in this photo dead, gray, and depressing, and that was the reality when I got to the park. So what today's video is about is how I edit boring photos. After the failed attempts I just covered, I shot some random pics in my room of me sitting there looking posed but bored, a few of me working on a song, and some random test shots. But these ended up being useful as I was able to use them to promote my new song with something just a tad nicer than posting the album art or something. So they did turn out useful, and you know, that's the thing about work and expectations, you gotta push through the boring sometimes. So without any further ado, let's take a look at how I edited these boring photos. Alright, starting with the light category in Lightroom Mobile, you see me messing with the exposure to get a good starting point for this edit. What I typically like to do from here is drop that contrast a bit and pull those highlights and shadows pretty far from each other. Shooting in RAW makes this process much nicer, and it's really just bringing in more detail from the extremes to make the photo feel more balanced. I also tweak the whites and blacks at the bottom while we're in this tab. And just keep in mind, we're going to come back to the light section at the end of the edit, specifically the exposure and the curves. As I learned over the years, it's easiest to tweak those two settings at the end once you have a better idea of the final look. In the color tab, I find myself bumping the white balance to the warmer end with almost all photos I take. Maybe the auto white balance on my camera skews cool, maybe I subconsciously like warmer photos, but either way, that's what I did here too. I also tapped once of the tint to tweak that just a tad, then brought the vibrance up and the saturation down. This ultimately helps to balance out the colors, keeping skin tones at a good spot, but bringing out the blues in the keyboard, lamps, and monitor as well. In HSL, you can see I pushed the oranges just a tad away from the reds as my skin tone is looking a bit off, and in the yellows, which really was just a bit of ambient spillover in the wall and door behind me, I pushed that towards orange, then desaturated and increased the luminance to make it look essentially brighter and whiter. Here's before adjusting the yellows and after one more time. With the greens, which is really just the plants in the back, I desaturated and pushed towards teal. Honestly, didn't have much of an effect since there was very little green in the photo. And in the teals, I pushed a bit towards blue and increased the saturation and luminance, making the keyboard and lamps look better. Can't really explain it beyond that. I also bumped the saturation and luminance of the blues, making my turtleneck just slightly more colorful and brighter. And lastly, there was some purple spillover from the turtleneck, and I got rid of that to make sure the turtleneck was blue and only blue. That's what I did with the HSL, and we're going to jump back to grading from the color category later on in the video. In the effects tab, I did nothing besides adding a slight bit of clarity for, you guessed it, more clarity, and a subtle white vignette to add a sense of glow to the overall photo. In the detailed tab, all I did was sharpen just a touch with some normal and color noise reduction to compensate, and just rounded things out from here. I jumped back to color grading from the color tab to add some sunshine tones to the highlights and purple teal to the shadows. This is real subtle, but it's a consistent split toning combo I've gone with for years. Another thing I find myself doing to almost every edit at the end is a slight black and white crush, just pulling down those intense bright whites and crushing those blacks for a smooth, modern, kind of Instagram-esque feel. And I said we'd come back to exposure as well. That's mostly just to remind you to make sure the brightness levels of the photo are where you want them. Right before I export a photo, I'll pop open that histogram, make sure everything lines up to what I'm thinking in my head. You know, with this photo, we got large spikes for all the darker hues in the photo, my turtleneck, my hair, the lamp and the screen, and a smaller yet noticeable spike for lighter hues like the background, the desk, and the keyboard. So we got good amounts of contrast and separation. The photo looks as good as a boring room shot can get, And the last thing we gotta do is copy these settings onto all the other photos from the shoot and export them all. Let's take a look at the final product. Cool. So before I head out, I want to thank two different companies for helping me put this together. First, Helloice sent me the white gold Cuban choker and the matching bracelet you see in the photos, both clean and simple pieces, I think added in the photo shoot. They're also quality and affordable at the same price. Both these pieces together cost less than 150 bucks, $80 choker, $70 bracelet, and they're both made of 316L stainless steel, with the choker also having an 18 karat white gold finish and CZs on the clasp. I don't really do jewelry reviews or features anymore, as I stick pretty neatly to that tech sphere, but today's video is that good old subjective art form of photography, so it makes sense to talk about the aesthetics of jewelry. Makes sense to me at least. So I wasn't paid a cent to say anything in particular about Helloice, so I mean it when I say that I like their jewelry, and this is stuff I'm gonna wear regularly. Helloice.com. And last but not least, Into the AM was kind of the sponsor of this video. They sent me some clothes as their brand for, quote, the guy that is always hustling, creating, and grinding to make his life better. Even though we were editing undeniably boring photos, it's still creating and grinding to make your life better. So if you're interested, intotheam.com for dope apparel for guys. I like companies with a vision. These guys are great to work with, so thanks for supporting the channel to y'all. Alright, that's it for this video. I appreciate everyone who made it to the very end. I hope you learned something for this one and found it useful, and I'll catch you in the next video.